Oh, hi, it's your old buddy Zoo here, and I find myself weirdly caught up with all of my review obligations. Like, I haven't had a handheld delivered in a week. It's been maybe 6 months since that happened. So I decided, this week for my video, we're gonna do a game showcase. Everyone loves those, right? If you're between your mid-40s and your mid-30s, chances are your very first handheld was probably the Game Boy DMG. After the DMG launch in 1989, Nintendo rapidly expanded the Game Boy library. There were like 4 or 5 dozen different color combinations and corporate branding options of the original Game Boy. Then they moved to the Game Boy Pocket, and then in Japan, they got the Game Boy Light, which is pretty cool. We didn't get one over here. But we did get the Game Boy Color, which quickly turned into the Game Boy Advance, and then the DS, and the 3DS, and then all the different versions of the DS and the 3DS. And I guess finally the Switch, and then the Switch 2, which is coming soon. So you could theoretically say that the Game Boy was literally the granddaddy of them all. With the debut of the Switch 2 coming in a month or two, maybe in a couple weeks, we don't know, I decided to take a look at my top 10 favorite regular Game Boy games. Now we're limiting it to regular Game Boy, like I just said. No Game Boy Color, that's going to be a second video. But the Game Boy library is vast. And while we talk about all these cool Game Boy games, I'm also going to show you some cool handhelds to play Game Boy games on. That's the whole point of the channel. Retro handhelds. Maybe you got here on accident, but that's what we do. We talk about Chinese emulation handhelds. Now this list is in no particular order, and I probably missed your favorites, and you're going to yell at me in the comments, but there's a library of over 500 Game Boy games in America, and probably more if you factor in Japan and Europe. So chances are, I'm probably going to miss one of your favorites. So if you're really mad about it, just let me know in the comments. I'm sure you will. No one is really shy when it comes to YouTube comments, especially when it comes to hurting my feelings. Anyway, without further ado, here are my top 10 favorite Game Boy games. First on my list is Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, and I'm playing this on the Anbernic 40XXV. Now this doesn't have a screen that's ideally suited for Game Boy, but it looks like a giant Game Boy DMG, so I like to use it for Game Boy. You have some slight bezeling on the sides, but honestly, this thing reminds me of a giant $60 analog pocket. Often hailed as one of the best Zelda games ever made, Link's Awakening broke new ground for handheld gaming. The game starts with Link stuck on Koholint Island, that's how you say it, and he has to awaken the wind fish to escape. Sounds kinda dumb, but the game introduced a really cool, dreamlike world full of quirky characters and intricate dungeons, and it's all packed into an impressive Game Boy portable format. It's a Zelda game, probably better than regular Zelda for the NES, on the Game Boy. This was amazing back in the day. And like I said, despite the Game Boy's hardware limitations, Link's Awakening managed to capture all that magic from the Zelda series. It has deep gameplay, clever puzzles, and really good storytelling. It also has a couple side-scrolling sections, and it borrowed a little bit from Mario, and it gives the game kind of a unique identity within the Zelda franchise. Now this game's success led to multiple re-releases, including a DX version for the Game Boy Color, and a full remake for the Nintendo Switch. Its charm, depth, and ingenuity solidify its place as one of the greatest portable adventures of all time. Here's the RGB20SX, and it's a sneaky good way to play Game Boy. It's probably one of my favorites. It is one of my favorites because it's my top 3 waves I'm featuring here, but I really enjoy using this to play Game Boy and any other 1x1 or 10x9 systems. No other game defines the Game Boy, for me at least, quite like Tetris. This was bundled with the system at launch, and it became an instant phenomenon. It turned the Game Boy from a toy into a must-own device. I brought my Game Boy over to my buddy's house when I was a kid for sleepovers and stuff, and his mom would play so much Tetris on that thing when I wasn't using it that she felt bad, and she bought me an AC adapter and a couple accessories because she used that thing probably 3 or 4 hours every time we had a sleepover. The game is simple, but it's addictive. People get locked into it, and it's basically endlessly replayable. The genius of Tetris is honestly in its accessibility. Anyone could pick it up and play, but if you wanted to master it, you needed skill and some strategy. The Game Boy's admittedly dinky, monochrome screen was a perfect fit for Tetris's minimalist visuals, and the addition of 2-player mode via the link cable ensured countless head-to-head battles. Even today, Tetris remains one of the greatest puzzle games ever created. Its influence on the industry is massive. It had a major movie about its creation, came out about a year ago, and its presence on the Game Boy cemented it as one of the best-selling and most beloved handheld games of all time. Third on our list is Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins. Super Mario Land 2 expanded on the dud that was the original Super Mario Land. It was just a bad game. But Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins, delivered a bigger, much more detailed Mario adventure. In Super Mario Land 2, you're not fighting Bowser. No, you're reclaiming your castle from Wario, who was a brand new antagonist introduced for this game. With larger, more detailed sprites and an open-ended level design, 6 golden coins felt closer to a true NES quality Mario game. Each of the 6 worlds featured unique themes and power-ups, including Bunny Mario, which allowed you to have extended jumps. This game had impressive visuals, pretty tight platforming, and memorable bosses, and it was honestly one of the best platformers for the original Game Boy. And again, it also introduced Wario, who would go on to become a Nintendo staple, with all sorts of spin-off series. Maybe we're going to talk about one later in this video, huh? Here's the Cube XX from Anbernic. This is the only one that's not vertical, obviously, but the ergonomics on this make it ideal as a long-haul Game Boy machine. So for RPGs, like Pokemon, I use this. At number 4, we got Pokémon Red and Blue. It's 2 games, but it's basically the same game. And technically, people are already yelling that it was released as a Game Boy Color enhanced game, but Pokémon Red and Blue originally launched for the Game Boy in Japan, and quickly became a worldwide sensation. You know how Pokemon works. You become a trainer, and you capture and you battle Pokemons, and then you eventually become the Pokemon champion. You want to be the very best. The game's concept of collecting them all 151 Pokemon that is, encouraged trading between players, utilizing the Game Boy's link cable to its fullest potential. You didn't live until you were trying to do some horse trading at lunch in like 2nd grade, and you're like, I gotta get this link cable hooked up. We gotta hurry before anyone sees us. I gotta get this new Pokemon from my buddy. I have blue, he has red. It's gonna be a fight. With its strategic turn-based battles, memorable music, and deep exploration, Pokémon Red and Blue captivated an entire generation, including me. Beyond just a game, Pokemon became a cultural phenomenon, spawning an anime, trading card game, which I didn't like in real life and the Game Boy version, and a never-ending franchise. I mean, think about it. Think about a Nintendo console or handheld that doesn't have a Pokemon game. Pokémon Red and Blue's initial massive success helped solidify it as a franchise, and it helped ensure Nintendo's dominance in the handheld market. At number 5, we got Metroid 2, Return of Samus. Metroid 2 was a bold evolution of the original NES Metroid, and it pushed the boundaries of what the Game Boy could achieve. Players guided Samus Aran deep into the caverns of SR-388 to exterminate the Metroid species, facing off against increasingly powerful evolutions of the alien creatures. Ooh. The game introduced save points, which was a crucial improvement over its predecessor, and its eerie, isolated atmosphere was enhanced by the Game Boy's limitations, giving it a unique sense of loneliness. Playing it on that small screen, you felt cramped, you felt a little bit claustrophobic. It enhanced the fact that it was a spooky space aliens type game. While Metroid 2 was later overshadowed by Super Metroid and its 3DS remake, it remains an essential entry in the series. It laid the groundwork for the Metroidvania genre and provided some of the most memorable moments in the franchise's history. Like, we played this in Game of the Month, and it's kind of wild how modern this game felt. Super ahead of its time, in my opinion at least. Up at number 6 is Donkey Kong. A surprising evolution of the original arcade game, Donkey Kong on the Game Boy started with the familiar levels before transforming into a full-fledged puzzle platformer. Players controlled Mario as he chased Donkey Kong through over 100 levels filled with challenging obstacles and clever mechanics. This game introduced new moves for Mario, including backflips and handstands, making it kind of feel like a precursor to Super Mario 64. Each stage required players to use logic and platforming skills to solve puzzles and reach the next challenge. You couldn't just put quarters in and coin go brrr. Its blend of action and strategy made Donkey Kong one of the Game Boy's most innovative titles, and the game's influence can be seen in later Mario vs. Donkey Kong titles, proving its lasting legacy. At number 7, we have Kirby's Dream Land. Marking the debut of Nintendo's Pink Puffball, Kirby's Dream Land introduced a new kind of platformer for the Game Boy. Unlike Mario, Kirby could inhale his enemies and fly indefinitely, making for a more relaxed, yet kind of more engaging gameplay experience. Although it's relatively short, Kirby's Dream Land set the foundation for the entire series with its charming visuals, catchy music, and intuitive controls. The game was really designed to be accessible to all players, which contributed to its broad appeal. Despite its simplicity, Kirby's Dream Land remains a delightful classic. It was the first step in making Kirby one of Nintendo's most beloved characters, leading to numerous sequels and spin-offs. Speaking of spin-offs, I told you we'd get to Wario. At number 8 we have Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3. Super Mario Land 3 is where Wario really stepped into the spotlight. It's a unique spin-off that introduced a ton of new mechanics to the Mario genre. Instead of rescuing a princess, Wario's goal was just selfish. He wanted to get as much treasure as possible. Who among us hasn't felt that urge? Unlike Mario, Wario's moveset focused on brute strength, allowing him to shoulder bash enemies and break blocks. Various power-ups granted him new abilities, like a dragon helmet that shot fire, or a jet hat for longer jumps. The game's humor, tight controls, and treasure hunting mechanics made Wario Land a beloved series in its own right, and it laid the foundation for Wario's future appearances in games beyond the Mario universe. Up at number 9 is Mega Man 5. Now, unlike other Mega Man entries on the Game Boy, Mega Man 5 featured an entirely original storyline and a unique set of enemies called the Star Droids. This before George Lucas wanted to sue everyone, I guess. With gameplay refinements and a new weapon, the Mega Arm, it set itself apart as one of the best action platformers on the Game Boy. The level design was creative, and it featured new environments and challenges that really pushed the Game Boy's hardware. The bosses were well designed, and they required strategy and skill to defeat. This wasn't just a copy and paste version of a Nintendo Mega Man. Mega Man 5 stands as one of the best handheld iterations of the Mega Man series, delivering an experience that was both fresh and new, while also staying true to its console roots. And then finally, at 10, is Final Fantasy Adventure. A precursor to the Mana series, Final Fantasy Adventure combined action RPG elements with deep storytelling. Unlike the turn-based Final Fantasy games you saw in the NES, this title featured real-time combat, pretty similar to what you'd see in Legend of Zelda. The game posted a pretty emotional narrative, an expansive world, and engaging mechanics like weapon-based puzzles. And players can find allies, each of whom has unique abilities, making for a varied gameplay experience. Despite the Game Boy's limitations, Final Fantasy Adventure delivered a surprisingly deep and satisfying RPG experience, cementing its place as a classic. This is actually kind of a clutch game for me, and I have a ton of memories of playing this one in the car while I was on trips, or while waiting in a parking lot while my mom was in a store buying clothes, because little Zoo wasn't allowed to go into the store because he was a pest. So we sat in a car and played Final Fantasy Adventure. And I guess it's time for What Did We Learn? And we learned that despite being around since 1989, the Nintendo Game Boy has a ton of great games to offer you, from RPGs to action RPGs. Probably should have thought that out better. Or even just puzzle games like Tetris or Dr. Mario, which I didn't put on this list, and now I'm thinking maybe I should have put Dr. Mario on here. I don't know. It's just really hard to narrow it down to 10. Anyway, if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe and comment and all that jazz. I'm sure you will comment, because this is probably divisive. Probably not Pokemon, and probably not Legend of Zelda, but everything else people are probably going to yell about. We're grinding away to 100,000 subscribers, and every last subscriber counts. You're all number one in my eyes, but when we do get to 100,000, if I can figure out a way to identify who that 100,000 subscriber is, heck, maybe I'll send them this RG cube with light bleed that I was going to fix, but then I didn't, because I'm easily distracted. Hey, there's a squirrel outside!